My parents secretly sold my birthday car to fund my golden sister's extravagant wedding, but my cold revenge turned her fairy tale into ruins. I'll never forget my 18th birthday. My parents handed me the keys to a bright red 2010 Mustang GT, and for a moment it felt like the universe had aligned perfectly. This car wasn't just a vehicle, it was freedom. It was late-night drives with my friends, the soundtrack of blasting music, and moments of quiet clarity when I was alone, just me and the open road. I washed it every weekend, waxed it until it shined, and even gave it a name, Scarlet. So, you can imagine my shock when Scarlet was suddenly gone. At first, I thought she had been stolen. I came home from work and the spot in the driveway where she usually sat was empty. I burst into the house in a panic and asked my parents what had happened. My dad casually mentioned, "Oh, we sold it, needed the extra money for Olivia's wedding," like he was talking about trading in an old couch. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My parents had sold the car they gave me without even telling me, just to throw my sister a dream wedding. And not just any wedding. Olivia wanted everything over the top, a designer dress, a venue that looked like a castle, an open bar, the works. Apparently, the $20,000 they had already set aside wasn't enough. Here's the kicker. The car wasn't even registered in my name. Technically, it was in my dad's name, so legally, they could do whatever they wanted with it. But morally, it was a betrayal I couldn't overlook. They didn't even have the decency to ask me. I don't know if it was Olivia's constant whining about wanting a fairy tale wedding or my parents' obsession with making sure their golden child was always happy, but they decided that my car was expendable. They didn't care what it meant to me or how it made me feel. That's when I realized something: they never cared about what I wanted. My whole life had been about Olivia. She got the best clothes, the most attention, the praise. I got whatever was left over. But this was too far. I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at my father, feeling this mixture of anger and betrayal boiling under the surface. He gave me a half-hearted apology about how it was for the family, and Olivia deserved this special day. But it didn't feel like an apology. It felt like he was trying to shut me up. Before I could say anything, I went to my room, slammed the door, and sat there stewing. They thought they could just take something that was mine and get away with it. They thought they could treat me like I didn't matter. No, they were about to find out how wrong they were. I spent the next few days trying to act normal. It wasn't easy. Every time I saw Olivia running around the house, all dizzy and glowing, I wanted to scream. She had no idea what my parents had done. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. Either way, the sight of her made my blood boil. Of course, my parents were too busy fussing over the details of the wedding to notice how angry I was. The catering menu, the flower arrangements, the rehearsal dinner, it was all anyone talked about. And every time they brought it up, all I could think about was Scarlet sitting in some stranger's driveway because they had sold her out from under me. I decided I wasn't going to let it go. Not this time. Not after years of being pushed aside so Olivia could have the spotlight. This wasn't just about the car. It was about everything. The years of being treated like I was less important. The constant favoritism. The way my parents had made it crystal clear that Olivia came first. But if they were going to have a perfect wedding for their perfect daughter, I was going to make sure they remembered it for another reason. The idea came to me when I overheard Olivia talking to her fiancé Ryan in the living room. I wasn't eavesdropping, not on purpose anyway, but her voice carried. She was complaining about some small detail, something about the colors of the napkins not matching the table runners. Ryan didn't seem to care. He just sat there, nodding along, clearly used to tuning her out. That's when it hit me: Ryan. He was the weak link. He wasn't exactly the picture of a devoted fiancé. He seemed more like the kind of guy who went along with things because it was easier than arguing. I'd seen him checking his phone during their conversations, rolling his eyes when she wasn't looking, even complaining to my dad about how expensive everything was getting. If I could get to Ryan, if I could plant just the right seed of doubt, I could blow this whole thing wide open. Of course, it couldn't be anything obvious. If Olivia or my parents suspected I was involved, they'd never let me hear the end of it. I had to be subtle, careful, something that couldn't be traced back to me. I spent the next few days gathering information. It wasn't difficult. Olivia loved to talk, especially about herself. She'd go on and on about her relationship, her plans, her vision for the future. And in all her ramblings, I began to notice cracks, like how Ryan didn't want to move to the city she picked out, or how he wasn't on board with her quitting her job to focus on being a wife. It was clear that Ryan was already on edge. He just needed a little push, and I was more than happy to give it to him. The opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. Ryan stopped by one afternoon while Olivia was out with Mom, finishing up some wedding nonsense. I was in the garage, pretending to organize tools, when he wandered in, looking for a beer. "The fridge is over there," I said, nodding toward the mini fridge in the corner. He grabbed one, popped the top, and leaned against the workbench. "Man, this wedding stuff is killing me," he said, half laughing, half serious. "I don't know how people do it. I didn't even have to push, he was already cracking." "Yeah, it seems like a lot," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "But hey, Olivia has a way of getting what she wants, right?" He snorted. "You're telling me, it's her world, and I'm just living in it. I could have stopped there, but I wasn't finished." "Must be tough," I said. "I mean, you're paying part of the bill, right?" He nodded and took a long sip of his beer. "Yeah, and her parents are chipping in too, but man, it's a lot. I told her we don't need all that, but she won't listen. Says it's her dream." I shrugged, like I didn't care. "I guess it's worth it if you're sure she's the one." That hit harder than I expected. Ryan hesitated, staring into his beer as if it held all the answers. "Yeah, sure," he said, but it didn't sound convincing. Bingo. I decided to twist the knife a little more. "You know," I said casually, "Olivia's always been intense. My parents spoil her, so she's used to getting her way. But hey, if you're okay with it, more power to you." Ryan didn't say anything, but the look on his face said it all. I let the conversation die after that, not wanting to overplay my hand, but I knew I'd planted something. A little doubt, a little unease. And with Olivia's personality, it wouldn't be long before that seed grew into something bigger. Over the next few days, I kept my distance, watching from the sidelines as things began to change. Ryan seemed more distant, less enthusiastic. Olivia noticed, of course, and began to press him on it. They argued a few times, loud enough that I could hear parts of it through the walls. Perfect. I didn't feel guilty, not one bit. They sold my car, like it was nothing. They deserved it. And Olivia, she finally got a taste of what it felt like to lose something she thought was hers. I didn't have to wait long for things to explode. The engagement party was the perfect storm. Olivia had planned this extravagant event in a fancy hall, complete with a live band, a professional photographer, and enough food to feed a small army. My parents had helped pay for it, of course. I went, mostly because skipping it would have been too obvious, but also because I wanted to see how things went. Everything started out well. Olivia was beaming, basking in the attention as her friends and family flocked around her. Ryan played his part, smiling and shaking hands, but I could see the cracks. He wasn't as attentive, didn't hover around her like an adoring fiancé should. He spent more time at the bar than at her side, which I found hilarious. And then it happened. About halfway through the night, someone made a toast. One of Olivia's friends, I think. She went on and on about how perfect Olivia and Ryan were for each other, how they were soulmates, and how lucky Ryan was to have found someone as amazing as Olivia. Ryan's smile faltered, only for a second, but I caught it. And apparently, so did Olivia. She cornered him after the toast and pulled him into a side room where they thought no one could hear, but they were loud and angry. "What's wrong with you?" Olivia's voice carried through the thin walls. "You've been acting strange all night." "I don't know, Olivia," Ryan shot back. "Maybe it's because I'm drowning in all this wedding crap. You don't listen to me. You don't care what I want. It's always about you." The room fell silent. I could imagine Olivia's expression, shocked, maybe even a little frightened. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. "That's not fair," she said, her voice rising again. "I'm trying to make this day special for both of us. If you can't see that, maybe you're the one with the problem." I wasn't sure how things escalated from there, but the next thing I knew, Ryan stormed out of the room, grabbed his coat, and walked out the front door. Everyone froze for a moment. Olivia ran after him, but he didn't stop. He got into his car and drove away without looking back. The whispers began immediately. Guests exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to leave or stay. My parents looked embarrassed, trying to calm Olivia as she stood there sobbing. I stayed out of sight, a smirk tugging at the corners of my mouth. The golden child's perfect night was officially ruined. The news came through a mutual friend of Ryan's, a guy who couldn't resist spilling the details. That very night, Ryan had called off the engagement, unable to stomach Olivia's self-centered demands and her towering expectations. The wedding was done, finished before it even began, and I'll admit, a quiet thrill coursed through me. There was something darkly satisfying about watching the carefully constructed world of my sister's perfect life unravel. Olivia was shattered. For days she barricaded herself in her room, her sobs echoing through the house, only interrupted by furious rants about how Ryan had dared to humiliate her in front of everyone. My parents, as always, closed ranks around their golden child, refusing to see her flaws. "He's nothing but a coward," my mother declared, her voice thick with indignation. "He couldn't handle a woman as strong and ambitious as Olivia." My father nodded, his face grim. "Good riddance. She deserves far better." I stayed silent, watching from the shadows as their narrative of Olivia's perfection began to crack. The engagement was history, the dream wedding a mirage, and my parents were left nursing the sting of thousands of dollars spent on a fantasy that would never come to pass. The fallout was inevitable, like a storm that had been brewing for years. One night, after Olivia had cried herself into an exhausted sleep, my parents cornered me in the kitchen. The air was heavy with accusation. My mother, ever the master of guilt, fixed me with a pleading stare. "How can you just stand there while your sister's heart is breaking? She's devastated, and you act like it doesn't matter." I shrugged, my voice flat. "It's not my problem." That was all it took to ignite my father's temper. His face reddened, his words sharp. "You've been smug about this whole mess. Did you have something to do with it?" I could have lied, could have dodged the question, but something in me snapped. I was done hiding. "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze. "I talked to Ryan. I told him the truth about Olivia, and it seems he didn't like what he heard." The room went still. My mother's eyes welled up, her hand trembling as it covered her mouth. My father, though, looked like he might burst. "You destroyed your sister's life over what? Some childish need for revenge?" "No," I shot back, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. I stood up for myself. "You sold my car, without so much as a word to me, all to fund her extravagant wedding. You've treated me like an afterthought my entire life, and I'm done swallowing it. You wanted Olivia's day to be perfect? Well, now you've got exactly what you deserve." The words hung between us, heavy and final. My father's face twisted with rage. He pointed to the door, his voice low and cold. "Get out. We don't want you here anymore." I didn't argue. There was no point. That night, I packed my belongings, my hands steady even as my heart raced with a mix of defiance and liberation. Using the meager funds my parents had grudgingly handed over after selling Scarlett, I bought an old, beat-up Tacoma truck. It wasn't my beloved Mustang with its gleaming red paint and roaring engine, but it was functional, and more importantly, it was mine. 3 months have passed since that night. I moved a few hours away, found a steady job at a mechanic's shop, and began carving out a new life. I haven't spoken to my parents or Olivia since, and if I'm honest, I don't miss them. They made their choice, Olivia, always Olivia, and I made mine, to walk away, to choose myself for once. Do I regret what I did to Olivia's engagement? Not for a second. They crossed a line when they sold Scarlett, treating my feelings as collateral damage in their quest to give Olivia her fairy tale moment. They learned, in the hardest way, that I'm not invisible, not someone they can trample over without consequence. Revenge doesn't heal every wound, but it carries a certain bitter sweetness, a reminder that I have the power to stand my ground. The truck, with its dents and scratches, became more than just a vehicle. It was a symbol of my resilience, a testament to my ability to rebuild from the ashes of betrayal. I'd spend weekends tinkering with it, tweaking the engine, silencing a stubborn squeak in the suspension. Each small fix felt like a step toward reclaiming myself, proof that I could create something whole, even if it wasn't flawless. My job at the shop kept me grounded. The guys there were a decent bunch, never prying too deeply into my past. I gave them the short version, a falling out with my family, a need for a fresh start. They nodded, accepted it, and moved on. No one pushed for more, and I was grateful for the space to breathe, to figure out who I was when I wasn't living in Olivia's shadow. The work itself was satisfying. There was something honest about fixing things. Bolts, wires, engines. Problems with clear solutions, unlike the tangled mess of family dynamics. I'd always loved working with my hands, a trait I'd inherited from my grandfather, who used to spend hours in his garage restoring old cars. Scarlett had been my pride, a connection to those memories, and losing her felt like losing a piece of that legacy. But the Tacoma, rough as it was, gave me a new canvas. I started to see its quirks as character, its imperfections as stories. It wasn't Scarlett, but it carried me forward, through long drives under starlit skies, through moments of quiet, reflection, where I could finally hear my own thoughts. Looking back, I realized that night in the kitchen wasn't just about the car or the wedding. It was about years of being sidelined, of watching my parents pour their love and attention into Olivia while I scraped by on leftovers. It was about finally saying enough, I don't know if they'll ever understand the weight of their choices, but I know I've found something they can't take away: my independence. The scars of that betrayal still linger, but they're fading, replaced by the quiet strength of a life I'm building on my own terms. And that, more than any revenge, feels like victory. Small towns have a way of keeping you tethered, no matter how far you run. Gossip travels faster than a wildfire, and through mutual friends, I stayed reluctantly in the know about Olivia and my parents. Olivia, it seemed, was still reeling from Ryan's very public exit. The sting of that humiliation lingered, her confidence shaken in a way I hadn't expected. Word was, Ryan had hightailed it to another state, already cozying up with someone new, leaving Olivia to pick up the pieces. My parents, true to form, were in full spin mode, hosting their fancy brunches and weaving a tale for anyone who'd listen. Olivia's just taking time to focus on herself, they'd say, painting Ryan as the villain who couldn't handle their perfect daughter. Classic move, dodging the truth to protect their golden child's image. It was almost amusing, watching them scramble to rewrite the narrative. Then came a twist I never saw coming. One evening, I was camped out at a dive bar near my apartment, nursing a cold beer and half watching a game flickering on the TV above the counter. The place was buzzing with the usual crowd, locals swapping stories, the clink of glasses filling the air. Suddenly, someone slid onto the stool next to me. "Small world, huh?" a familiar voice drawled. I froze, then turned, and there he was, Ryan, in the flesh. For a moment, I just gaped, caught off guard. He looked different, looser, like he'd shed a weight, his shoulders no longer hunched with tension. But it was unmistakably him, grinning like we were old buddies catching up. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Moved into town a few weeks ago," he said with a shrug. "Needed a fresh start, couldn't exactly stay in the city after, well, you know." "Yeah, I know," I said, grinning. "Man, your family, no offense, but they're crazy," he said, shaking his head. "Olivia, your parents, they're on another level. The way they micromanaged, everything, the expectations, it was like I signed up to marry all three of them." I laughed because what else could I do? "You're not wrong. They've been like that all my life. Olivia gets what she wants, and the rest of us just have to deal with it." Ryan sat back and took a long sip of his drink. "You know, I didn't realize how bad it was until I got out. The wedding was just the tip of the iceberg. She wanted me to quit my job, to move closer to your parents, said it was important to stay in the family fold." "Classic Olivia," I said. He shook his head and smiled faintly. "I should thank you, really. If you hadn't said what you did, I might have gone through with it. You saved me a lifetime of headaches." I raised my glass. "Here's to dodging bullets." We ended up talking for a couple of hours. Ryan didn't hold a grudge, which surprised me. If anything, he seemed relieved to have someone who understood how crazy the whole situation had been. Before he left, he said something that stayed with me. "You did the right thing by standing up for yourself. They may hate you for it, but at least you're free. That's more than a lot of people can say." It was strange to hear him say that, but it felt good. For the first time, I didn't just feel vindicated, I felt validated. When Ryan left the bar, I sat there for a while, finishing my drink and thinking about everything he'd said. Maybe I'd lost my family in the process, but I'd gained something else: peace. And frankly, I wouldn't trade that for anything. A few weeks after I met Ryan, I heard that Olivia had a new boyfriend. His name was Brandon, some corporate type with a good salary and a fancy apartment in the city. My parents were thrilled, of course, already calling him a much better fit than Ryan. I didn't know the guy, but I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for him. He had no idea what he was getting himself into. By the sound of it, he was smitten. Olivia could be charming when she wanted to be, and I was sure she'd pulled out all the stops. Still, I couldn't see it lasting. Some people had to learn the hard way. Brandon would find out soon enough.